South Korean authorities say they had no guidelines for Halloween crowds as families grieve 154 victims. CNN reporter returned to Itaewon's narrow alley one day after the Halloween disaster. South Korea CNN. South Korean authorities said Monday they had no guidelines to handle the huge crowds that gathered for Halloween festivities in Seoul, as families in the country and around the world mourn the 154 victims of Saturday night crowd crush. The crush took place in the narrow, neon-lit alleyways of the popular nightlife district Itaewon, where witnesses described being unable to move or breathe as thousands of revelers stood shoulder to shoulder in the street no more than 4 meters, 15 feet wide. Frantic families spent much of Sunday gathering at information centers where authorities compiled the details of the deaths and wounded, and contacting morgues and hospitals in the desperate attempt to locate missing relatives. With all of the victims now identified, the panic has transformed to national grief as the country grapples with one of its worst ever disasters, while parents overseas make arrangements for their deceased children in a foreign land. A woman pays tribute at the memorial altar on October 21st in Seoul, South Korea. Official memorial altars were set up in central Seoul Monday, with photos showing crowds visiting to pay their respect. Many were in tears and holding white flowers. Others knelt and bowed deeply to the altar. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, his wife Kim Gun-hee, and the top officials, including the Prime Minister and the Seoul Mayor, joined the mourners. Many shops and businesses were closed to observe the week-long national period of mourning. Parts of central Seoul were nearly deserted, a highly unusual sight in the usually bustling capital that's home to about 10 million people. People also paid respect at the makeshift memorial in Itaewon, outside the subway station near the alley where the crash occurred. The station entrance is adorned with rows of flowers and offerings such as handwritten notes, bottles of Korean liquor, soju, and paper cups filled with drinks. Among the mourners was the civic group of the bereaved families of the Sewol ferry disaster, which killed 304 people, mostly teens, in a school trip when the vessel sank in 2014. As one who had suffered the same pain, my heart is torn and I'm rendered speechless. One of the group's members told the reporters at the memorial, saying the families were saddened to see a major disaster like this repeated. Questions about police numbers. Just down the street, the entrance to the alley had been cordoned up, with security personnel standing guard as forensic teams clad in white protective suits scoured the area, still littered with trash and debris. Amid the grief, questions have emerged about the government handling of the incident and the apparent lack of crowd control before the tragedy. One survivor, 22-year-old French exchange student Annie Lou Chevalier, told CNN she passed out in the crowd after being crushed by fellow revelers. At some point, I had no air, and we were so crushed to other people that I couldn't breathe at all, so I just passed out. Chevalier said. Several eyewitnesses and survivors said they had seen few or no police officers in the area before the situation deteriorated. Earlier on Sunday, the Minister of Interior and Safety said only a normal level of security personnel had been deployed to Itaewon because the crowd there did not seem unusually large, whereas a considerable number of police had been sent to another part of Seoul in response to expected protest. Mourners paid tribute for victims of the deadly Halloween crowd surge in Seoul on October 31st, 2022. But facing a backlash from Korean politicians and on social media, authorities seems to change tack on Monday, saying they had deployed about 137 personnel to Itaewon that night, compared to about 30 to 70 personnel in previous years before the pandemic. For this times the Halloween festival, because it was expected that many people would gather in Itaewon. I understand that it was prepared by putting in more police force than other years, said Oh Seung-jin, director of the Violent Crime Investigation Division at the National Police Agency. However, he admitted currently there is no separate preparation manual for such a situation where there is no organizer and the gathering of the crowd is expected. Moreover, the police have been deployed not for crowd control, but for prevention and to prevent various illegal activities. Kim Seung Ho, director of the Disaster and Safety Management Division at the Ministry of the Interior and Safety, echoed this comment, said they did not have the guidelines or the manual for such an unprecedented situation. Victims emerged. The victims were mostly young people who had gone to Itaewon Saturday night, eager for South Korea's first Halloween celebrations in years without COVID restrictions. Of the 154 deaths, 12 were teenagers and 102 were in their 20s. The Ministry of the Interior and Safety said in its situation report Monday, with 55 men and 99 women killed. Among their number were 26 foreign nationals from countries including the United States, China, Iran, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Japan, Australia, Norway, France, Russia, Austria, Vietnam, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. A further 149 people were injured, 33 seriously, including 14 foreign nationals. Six students were who attended schools in Seoul, one middle schooler, and five high schoolers are among the deaths, as well as three teachers, said the Korean Ministry of Education. Three South Korean military personnel were also among those killed, said the Korean Defense Ministry official. Steve Blassie, 20, a college student from Marietta, Georgia. Two American colleague students were identified: Steve Blassie from Georgia and Annie Jessie from Kentucky, both their both in their junior year. Blassie's father, Steve Blassie, said his son had always been an adventurer. He was an eager scout, like basketball, and wanted to learn multiple languages, he said. Maybe in a half hour before this tragedy event took place, I texted him in WhatsApp. I know you're out and about. Stay safe. I love you. And I never got a response back, Steve said. I had an incredibly bright future that is now gone. Dan Jeske and Annie's father said in a statement Sunday evening that the family was completely devastated and heartbroken, calling Anne a bright light loved by all. Annie Anne had been nursing students studying abroad in Seoul this semester, said the president of the University of Kentucky. Anne Jiansky, a student at the University of Kentucky who died in the crowd crossing in Seoul. The father of Mei Tomikawa, a 26-year-old Japanese exchange student who was killed in the crush, told the Japanese public broadcaster NHK he was prepared for the worst when he couldn't reach her. She was studying Korean before starting school in Seoul, he said, speaking before traveling from Japan to South Korea on Monday. I tried to calling her to warn her to be careful, but she never answered her phone, he said. According to NHK, she was a great daughter. I want to see my daughter as soon as possible. Grace Ratchet, an Australian woman killed in the crowd crash in Seoul, South Korea. The family of the Australian victim, Grace Ratchet, also released a statement on Monday describing her as the talented film producer who was fascinated about making a difference. We are missing our gorgeous Angel Grace, who lit up a room with her infectious smile. Grace always made others feel important, and her kindness left an impression on everyone she ever met. Grace always cared about others, and she was loved by all, the family wrote. Authorities were now working with foreign embassies and families overseas, offering support with the funeral arrangement. As the week goes on, more names and faces of those who died are likely to emerge as the nation searches for answers as to how such a disaster in the area not to be crowded on Halloween with festivities weeks in the planning could have unfolded. CNN's Niam Kennedy contributed to this report.